it should be another draft physics video presentation. So we're going to play this way overstated in terms of the promise of this video. Some video that's going to debunk something I've said or theorized, or however you want to describe it, my counter theory to the junk of conventional physics. And it says here, DraftScience, it's the photon stupid. I don't know why he's taking that quote from the website, because it's more about bent space and virtual stuff and the fact that it's just real stuff. But anyway, debunked in less than 7 minutes. Apparently it's going to be two slit stuff, but there won't be any debunking of anything. This is just first in a series of videos in which I believe, to any sure human satisfaction, sane human's satisfaction. So he goes so far to say you have to be insane not to believe they're garbage. Thoroughly and completely debunk Gary's unfalsifiable garbage. So yes, unfalsifiable compared to bent space, virtual photons, entanglement, multiverses, photons with radar, wave functions. Yeah, right. My theory's unfalsifiable. Yeah, what a pile of crap. So we have the video's supposed to start and then they wait 2 minutes to start it. That's just so lame of YouTube. I mean, it's just a stupid waste of time. Stay tuned. So he's all this hype. He posts a link, does this silly premiere thing, which is really you just take a regular video and you don't have it show up, and you let idiotic chatters think they're talking to you live or something. Because they're too stupid to figure out it ain't a live room. It's just making the video look like it's live when it's not live. So all just hype. You know, little games the little trolley types have to play. Blah, 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 blah. So we have to wait the stupid minute till the fun begins. So anyway, yesterday I did make a video, did point out a new theory that explains the two slit even better. So it's even more complete, my argument, than before. It's just getting stronger and stronger, and their physics is getting weaker and weaker. The video last night I pointed to a Professor Lewin clip where he completely just ignores the fact that there's two patterns in the double slit. You know, they don't have any explanation. None. So, prepare for something. This should be a little bit funny, because the arrogant falling and such. I mean, all these people with their bold claims of what they've proven and what they've done. Nothing. Unaccountable troll. 2 sock accounts. He has to use 2 different sock accounts to, post links and post videos on. Let's see what we get.
Okay, this is a video presentation called "It's the Photon Stupid." So this is the title of the video, and
so again, the title of my physics really isn't just about the 2 slit experiment. So the whole point of saying it's the photon stupid is just to recognize that photons are particles. Everything behaves in the same quantized matter as photons. All the energy in the universe, all the forces behave like photons, and they don't behave like waves.
This is an illustration, a rough illustration of the single slit pattern, which is also known as a diffraction pattern, caused when you have one slit open and you're shining a laser through it.
Right. Now this is a stupid illustration, just in the sense that depending on how wide you make the slit, you can change this pattern dramatically. So if I make it very narrow, I'll just get one big long wide hump, and then another wide hump, and another, and that's it. We'll see very little. I make it wider, a little wider, a little wider, I'll get bars, 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 bars. The center one will always be 2, okay? 2 bars worth. And it's actually because it's a composite of 3 bars, to tell you the truth. The light that never gets, well, I could draw that, but we'll wait.
About 80% of the photons will land in this band here.
Says you. Okay, so they just make up these numbers. There's no experiment where anyone's ever detected how much energy actually gets through the slit. So let's understand, I could never find an experiment where they first measure how intense the laser beam's total photons are. Then measure the percentage the slit is covering. So the slit would have a certain opening, a certain area, and you would have an estimate of how much light can actually get through the slit. And then measure the slit, the entire light that gets through the slit. They haven't even done that much, because what they'll find is that there's less photons than should be going through the slit. That there's less photons that actually make it through the slit than what should be making it through by their wavy theory.
Sure. And then we'll have fringe patterns on the side where we have the central maximum, and then
oh wow, see, he's already so trivial that how can this possibly be a response to the video I made? Oh, it's clearly not.
we have several other.
I mean, I showed you Adam Lohr's diagram. I probably have that on. Yeah, maybe I'll pause and see if I can find that and such. Alright, should be back. So yeah, this is an image I had in a previous video. So this shows the single slit superimposed over a double slit of exactly the same dimensions. That is, the single impediment is the same width as the slit is in the first experiment. And so you can see the overlay of the two patterns quite obviously. And clearly, as I expand, that is, if I widened that distance, this pattern would end up looking more and more like this pattern. But the point is there's this is 2 nodes worth in the center.
Lesser maxima, local maxima. And about 80% of the photons land in this band.
Right. No, they don't really land in that band in the sense that it really does get intensely bright right in the center of that band, which is the light actually that doesn't get bent. The light that actually passes through the slits in a straight line and never gets interfered with, so to speak, which is the clear explanation why the center band is much brighter, is because it includes all the photons that didn't hit an electron, by my theory.
And I just want to make it very clear what this is illustrating. Although this is a chart with an x and a y-axis, the y-axis represents the number of photons that land, in a given range.
Right. So this is like a no-brainer, duh kind of argument in the sense that their explanation of waves doesn't work, in the sense that they're not accounting for the fact they think every photon is somehow part of this going somewhere. Okay, being converted into a wave. So you have a single slit. Now they artificially come up with just idiotic bullshit logic to explain why there's 2 waves. So they have no accounting for why single wave comes in and it breaks into 2. Water does this. Okay, light does this. 2 waves. So not consistent in any way whatsoever with water waves. And then they overlap like this. And so their theory, through no mechanism, so there's no explanation for why this is bright. Their wave theory says there's the same amount of energy here, 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 here. Same amount of energy. So how does 80% of the energy end up here with 2 waves? It doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense at all. Why would it be 80%? How did 80% of the photons get here? Well, see, my theory points out how, no, some of the photons go straight through, just like I could shoot nuclei into a piece of gold, and I can get some of the nucleuses to go straight through. They don't hit anything. They just go straight through. So yes, some of the photons go straight through, don't get hit, they end up here. And then these photons combine this way and this way to create a lobe here. And there's a lobe here. So you have 3 sources. You have this source from this side, okay, you could say creates this from the 0 point. So that lobe. And then this side creates this lobe. So that's why it's twice the width. So that's why the width is 2x, because there's 2 lobes right next to each other, 0 and to 1, right? And 1 on this side. And then there's the center lobe right here that's filling in this spot that would be this would be a dark spot. But this, the light that's not hitting anything, right? This is a millimeter wide, this little slit. So that light goes right where the two lobes would have meet. So it would have looked like this. But instead of looking like that, there's a lobe right here. So that's why the center is high. It's because there's more photons there. Again, they don't explain why there's more photons. Wave theory does not predict higher agitation there. Just like if I did water waves and I sent two water waves through two slits, you know, just to create two, because the water won't do the single slit, you won't get 80% of the agitation here. There won't be 80% of the agitated water here. No, there'll be the same amount, 80%. There'll be the same percentage at all these locations in water. Water will have just as much agitation here as it'll have here, as it'll have here. It gets a little bit diminished just because the travel distance of the wave is longer, and obviously the waves get weaker and weaker as they travel distance. But that's the only thing that diminishes in water waves. This guy obviously hasn't researched this. He doesn't know anything about it. He's just talking out of a grammar school physics textbook.
Okay, so it does not mean that the photons land up here and then they land down here. The photons don't actually land on the line of this diagram. Okay, the y-axis, the height of the graph.
Duh. So yes, he's doing an intensity diagram, right? So intensity doesn't go up and down. Yes, everybody gets it. You look at the pattern, right? Again, he couldn't just show the pattern. Show the pattern, retard. I mean, moron. I mean, liar. Why don't you just show it? All right, so it's clearly brighter in the center here. Why is it brighter in this center? Oh, that's right, because those are the photons that pass right through without being diffracted, without being deflected by any electrons. That's the simple explanation.
F represents the number of photons that land in that area. That should be obvious, but you know, I was watching some videos by some ostensible physicists, internet physicists, who claim otherwise, that somehow this diagram is misleading, and it's clearly not. But let's go to the next.
Well, why didn't you cite those? Why don't you cite a reference? So what online physicists were doing that? I haven't seen anybody argue that this is anything other than intensity. So where did you say that somebody thought the shape of the pattern should go up and down? Where did you see that guy? So far, just crap.
Next page. So if you again, this pattern is dependent, you know, that the length of this band is dependent on the slit width. Okay, if you make the slit width smaller and you decrease the slit width until it's the length of the wavelength of the photons of the laser, then you do get a sort of a uniform band, a gradient. Where most of the photons land here, but then the band is actually spread out. Okay, and you don't.
So again, why are most of the photons landing here? And again, is it still 80% of the photons are in this whole band? And we know that the only reason the other nodes are still there, they're just really weak now. So no, like Professor Lewin wouldn't suggest that. No, that's all that happens. There's just diffraction and there's absolutely no photons on the other sides. He wouldn't say that.
See any fringe patterns in particular. You just see sort of a central maxima, and then the
see, as you make the slit width narrower and narrower, there's less photons. So eventually you run out of pattern because you've run out of photons. There's not enough photons going through the slit for you to create an image of them, especially a large image. As you make the image larger by projecting it further and further away, you reduce the pixel density. The number of photons actually hitting the target per square inch becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're less likely to be able to see them anymore. Gee, this guy's stupid.
Strength of the laser dies off. And then I want to show what you would.
So none of this refutes a single thing stated in my video. So he's debunked absolutely none of my quotes, no statements from me, nothing so far. Not a single statement refuted, debunked.
Expect if this double slit pattern was the consequence of two single slit patterns lying on top of each other. So what you would expect to see.
So that's if you were stupid. Okay, so as I showed in this diagram, these are the two patterns laid across each other. All right, so they have these two patterns are made by having a single slit, okay, for the top one. And the bottom one has the impediment in the same location as the slit, and it's the same width as the slit. And then it has the openings here and here, and they're the same exact size as the impediment. So the openings, I'll draw it. I mean, just to be accurate, you know, I mean, you people should be able to follow along, but I'll make it even easier for you to follow along. So that pattern right there, these two, this image is made by having a single slit of, say, this dimension, and then putting right next to it another slit with the double slit, and this width will be the same as this width and the same as this width. So all of the surfaces are exactly the same distance from each other. So every one of these surfaces is the same distance. You know, this is the same distance, this is the same distance, this is the same distance. And that's the overlay pattern. You can see where they line up perfectly. They line up perfectly because it's really about the sources. This will be a source. This will be a source. That equals these two sources. And then you have these two sources on the outside, okay? And now they're the ones that create the very long lines. And that's what this is really about, is how long are the lines. See, this line, this line, this line, this line. You can see this creates, having these two way out here, creates the very long lines where you have intersection. So overlaying the two patterns, you get this image, not this stupid piece of crap this moron drew. That's not what happens. The two overlay each other perfectly.
These are two single slit patterns.
So they're obviously not, right? Because he's drawing them as if there's diverging with distance. The pattern, you have to understand, the slits are tiny and the distance is very far where you're seeing the pattern. So it's really big pattern, really tiny slit. And he's drawn it as if I could move those couple of millimeters and I would create a difference on the screen you could see. You'd never see the difference. As long as you moved everything, those couple of millimeters, you wouldn't be able to see the movement of a couple of millimeters. It would be invisible. And he's drawn it as if it would make this huge difference. Look how far away that red line is from the blue line. You'd never see that. Never happen.
This is a red.
So he's just making this crap up.
One slit. Interference pattern. A diffraction pattern. And the blue graph represents a blue. This should be slit pattern. Okay. What you would expect to see if it was just...
So more nonsense about expectations. So, you'd expect to see... No, you would expect it because you're stupid. People who understand that it's a 1 millimeter slit, okay, understand that I can't make the whole pattern shift way over the place by just moving the slit 1 millimeter over or 1 millimeter over here. You never see the difference. If I move the single slit from this position to this position, you'd never see the difference on the wall. If I moved this whole section over here or over here, you'd never see it on the wall. He's an idiot. what he's doing is comparing. He's taking the slit pattern, and so he's taking a single slit, and then he's putting the double slit as if the double slit was here, and here. Like you had two slits, and he's pretending there isn't going to be an impediment in the middle. You can't, these are automatically displaced. You can't pretend they're not going to be displaced by the distance of the impediment. So you can't say, well, I'm taking two single slit patterns and putting them right next to each other. Well, you can't do that. You have to include the impediment, retard. The distance of the impediment is the distance between the two slits. You have to include that. You can't do two single independent slits. If I put them way over here, then I'll get, yes, two single slit patterns if I move them really far from each other. But if you keep them the same distance as the single slit opening was, the two patterns will fall right on top of each other.
If the double slit pattern was the result of two single slit patterns on top of each other. So that's actually a hypothesis. And it's a testable hypothesis.
It's a pile of shit.
And unfortunately,
it's a testable hypothesis. Then you already lost the test. There's the image. This isn't a fake image. The guy has a professionally made slit, okay, and it's just as I pointed out. The two patterns are dead right on top of each other. So obviously, I've just proved your theory garbage. It's garbage.
Able to hide behind unfalsifiability because it actually is falsifiable.
Then falsify it, you stupid piece of scum.
If we measured
it's obviously falsifiable by what? A drawing you drew? Where's your evidence? Where's your evidence of a double slit put in exactly the same position as a single slit, and demonstrating that these two slits somehow don't create a pattern that overlaps the same position as the single slit would be if you put the single slit right where the impediment is. If you put it in the same position, you'll get exactly what I showed. So you're the liar.
Strength at this point. Because these are additive, every photon that goes through slit on the slit on the left is going to land somewhere.
So again, these idiots, this, I've always made this argument. This isn't about stupid slits. It's about surfaces. Surfaces are defining where the diffraction's taking place because the surfaces are obviously have electrons on them, and obviously that's what's deflecting the light in different directions, the pieces of light, and then you're just reconstructing the pieces. This theory works. He's not debunking anything I stated. Again, there's no quotes from my video. There's nothing from my video that he's demonstrating I am wrong in how I stated it or what I stated. So he debunks by not even addressing a single point in my video.
Or on this blue line, if it was the only open slit. But because they're additive, we can add the lengths of each of these. We can add the length of the one. Again,
what you're adding is two different locations. The double slit has 4 locations. Okay, this is the single slit. This is the double slit. This one creates the little lines. This creates the places where the little lines will have enough pieces to make photons.
Y coordinate at each x coordinate. So here we have no height added by the red pattern. So the point on the graph, the additive graph, is going to be right here. Okay, but if we go right here, you see this length is right here. So if we go all the way up here, then the strength of the light is going to be up here. Okay, because this length is the same as this length. And if we go over here, we have to go up the same distance, so the strength is going to be up here. If we measure at this point on the x-axis, we go up here, but then the strength is here because we're adding the strengths of each of these graphs.
Well, I would say that is unfalsifiable because it's incomprehensible goop. What?
So if we connect these, we should get something that looks like this, and then eventually it's going to, die down, and it's going to go back here, and it will just keep doing that. So we'll never actually have dark bands on the photodetector. Okay.
No, it's not okay. This is just crap. Again, it doesn't say anything about what I stated as a possible explanation. So you didn't debunk a single thing I offered as an alternative explanation, and you're not even saying anything rational in defense of conventional physics.
So the graph will look like this. Okay, and with no dark bands. Okay, so no dark bands. And
so again, there's no, Professor Lewin wouldn't agree with this. See, if you go less than the wavelength of the lights, right, you have to make a slit that's smaller than the wavelength of the light. Just means that it's something under 3 or 4 or 500 nanometers. But you still have phase differences when you go to a half phase or a quarter phase. So so you start with a slit this big and you get lots of pattern. Okay, you narrow the slit, make it smaller. All right, the pattern gets wider and whatever. So you make it smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, even though you go smaller than the wavelength of light, 500 nanometers, even if you go smaller than that, the point is still, the fact is that yes, it creates a very wide pattern, and there's very few photons, but you still these nodes would still be here. You could, if you put photographic paper, you'll still see them, because you still have two sources essentially. They're making two artificial waves, and there's still, any distance they are apart creates wave interference, because they're still making two waves by their own theory. So Professor Lewin would say that each one is a Huygens source, and each one is going to, so they're going to cancel out, and you end up with two waves. So yeah, you have two waves that are compound. That is, they don't, let's see how to say it. They are overlapping in the space of this wave. They're already overlapping, because your 2 point sources are going to be a percentage of that. So they won't look like this and this, right? They'll look like this and this before they even left. You know what I mean? They won't be two independent waves right from the start. But they're still going to create an interference pattern. So they're still going to create the same pattern, in the sense that they won't create just one kind of diffraction. They're going to create diffraction that creates the nodes. They're going to create these things. They're just not going to be visible, because there are not going to be enough photons hitting the location. So he's not even arguing conventional physics. He's arguing his own mush.
Let's see what happens when we actually do the experiment. What do we see when we actually do the double slit experiment? We get something.
So he's just talked about the single slit, and then he says double slit. Double slit doesn't do this shit. So that's coarse shit.
Being completely different. Okay, where this is the single. So the blue line represents the single. I keep writing the single slit pattern. The blue line represents a single slit pattern, and
so this is so ironic, right? Because I should just replay my video. He's debunking my video, and this is exactly consistent with what my video said would happen, with just using the fact that you're reconstructing photons at these specific angles created by these 4 locations. Okay, when there's 2 slits, there's 4 sources. So unlike their silly theory of 2 slits, 2 sources, that doesn't work. And so he's bringing up the 2 patterns which they have no theory for, which is also ironically funny. Their 2 waves won't make that pattern. 2 waves can't make that pattern. I'm the one who explained it. So, I mean, it's just so ironic. But obviously the double slit, the point is there's 4 sources. See, their theory only has 2 sources, here and here. 2 waves. The real truth is there's four sources, and the four surfaces also, you could do the same cancellation geometry, the same geometry that tells you these have to be full wavelengths of distance for the bits to still be in phase. So the distance difference between this line and this line has to be full wavelengths of distance for these photons to be able to take pieces from this one and pieces from this one and combine them. They have to have the same phase. And these will be the locations where that's possible. And you'll get a line here, a line here, and a line here, and a line here, and then they'll stop, and you'll get nothing. And the place you get nothing is because this contribution, the ones from this source and this source, are not full wavelengths different. They're half wavelengths different. They're out of phase, therefore they can make no contribution here, and there isn't enough energy from the other two sources to make up for that absence. And so you'll get no photons here, even though you're supposed to get them, if the two slit was to do what they predict. What I showed Professor Lewin doing, ignoring this dip. I showed him basically pretending this dip didn't exist.
The white line represents the double slit pattern. And notice that here and here we have locations where no photons land. Okay, so these are locations with no photons, stupid. Okay, and again...
And it's exactly what I said. It's exactly what I said in my video. Exactly what I asserted. So he's debunking me by confirming exactly what I said. Amazing asshole.
The distance from here to here, this is, let's call this lambda. This distance is lambda. This distance
is silly to call it that because it's obviously 2 lambdas worth of distance. But whatever, idiot. Keep trying. It's obviously more than that. It's obviously this is not happening. This is happening on a screen of undefined distance. So you can't say this distance is lambda. That's retarded.
This is the same as this distance.
It's the same as 2 times the size of a node. So every one of the interference bars has a width. The center in the double slit is twice that. In the single slit, it's not. I mean, the double slit, the single slit is twice. The single slit, it's a regular node. So he doesn't even have that part right. The double slit does not create a node here. It creates bars inside of this. So he hasn't even got, again, here's the pattern. I mean, shit. Look how many bars there are here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There are 11 interference nodes inside of the single slit node. That's the obvious truth here. It's right there in front of you, idiot.
This is lambda. Okay, but if under certain ostensible physicists' hypotheses or hypothesis, you should see no.
Who are you talking about? What are you talking? Are you saying my hypothesis? Because you haven't quoted anything from my hypothesis at all here. You haven't shown it. You haven't done anything. Who are you talking about?
Dark bands in this lambda strip, the strip of the photodetector. With length lambda. But here, in reality, we do see dark bands. And then we also see dark bands over here and here.
And you see this big empty spot that isn't explained by wave theory. Show how wave interference accounts for this absence of a bar here. Draw your 2 waves and show how your 2 waves create this double pattern. Oh, that's right, you can't do it because it's mechanically impossible with your theory.
Where there shouldn't be any. Okay, so that's 7 minutes. That was a 7-minute debunk of...
Okay, so let's just point out the obvious. It didn't debunk a single thing I said. Not one fucking quote, not one statement, not one image from what I drew. Nothing to demonstrate that any of this crap has anything to do with what I said or what I suggest or what I theorize. Anything. It's completely irrelevant. Doesn't address a single issue and has the fraud in it of saying somehow regular physics has accounted for these two patterns. When again, I can play Professor Lewin not accounting for it. So let's play some of this.
And there you see it. There you see a maximum, darkness, a maximum, darkness, a maximum, darkness.
Right, now there's only 3 lumps inside here. So obviously this is a crappy double slit where he has the widths different. Okay, the width of the slit is different than the length of the openings. That's why he only has 3 nodes in the middle. So unlike this image, okay, you know, where you have a whole bunch, you have 11, right? So 11 what I counted? You have 11 nodes. He only has 3 because he doesn't have these distances. The distances of the slit isn't the same as the distance of the impediment. And so that's why he's got this unusual number. Then he's suggesting that bright, dark, and you can see that this center, well, there's no point. This center is twice as big as these other nodes, but you can't see it in his. You can see it here kind of obviously, that this node is twice, this one in the center is twice what this one would be if you count every little bit of photon, that this accounts for twice this the width. And it's brighter, and that's why you see a little bit more of it, but it's just twice.
And so on.
So he just says and so on. So he goes light and then dark and then light and then dark and then light and then dark. Oh, wait, there's one missing here, isn't there? Yeah, it's completely missing. He doesn't account for that. So he just pretends it's all the same pattern and so on. And it's not the same pattern. There is no same pattern and so on. All right, and then play this other one too.
At x equals 0, there is unmistakable, unnegotiable, there is a maximum. That coincides with theta equals 0. And then here, at lambda divided by a, completely destructive interference. That's that angle theta 1 times L. And then here, L 2 lambda divided by a, complete destructive interference. And the same is true, of course, on the other side.
Again, 2 wavelengths.
And what you're going to see now in terms of the intensity that I showed you there, watts per square meters, is a curve that looks like this. You got an enormously broad maximum, absolutely 0 here, very small maximum, absolutely 0 there, very small maximum, and 0 there, and this continues for a long time.
Right, that's the single slit. Now obviously the single slit can look very different if you just make the slit wider. These humps, it'll obviously start looking like just a bar pattern. You won't see this huge difference will become less and less apparent the wider you make the slit.
And this is very different from anything we've seen with multiple sources. If the intensity here is I0, then the maximum here, which I didn't even calculate where it is somewhere in between these 2 minima, but I didn't calculate precisely where it is. That maximum is very low. It's only 4.5% in strength of I0.
Right, and what's the theory for that in a single slit? They don't have a theory for that number. They just realize the number, you know, like I said, no one's ever done the calculations in the sense, no one's done the experiments and measured the amount of light, so there's no, that I could find. So we don't get any real numbers here. But why, by their theory, do these 2 waves do that? Because water doesn't do that, okay? Water doesn't make one wave that's gigantically agitated, you know, huge difference in the swell, and then right next to it, it's only 4.5%. 4.5%. There's no example in water doing that. Water doesn't create one little place where it's going crazy, and the other places, oh no, it's a lot more relaxed. That doesn't happen with water. So what's their theory of wave interference? It's obviously not duplicating waves. Obviously.
It's the photon stupid. In 7 minutes, debunked. Shot to hell.
Alright, well, again, he didn't debunk a single statement in my video. Not a single statement. Nothing. Not a single drawing, not a single... nothing. Absolutely 0 debunked. So he's just a pathetic liar. So that's it. This is you know, these arrogant putzes. You know, they just assume somebody's wrong. They don't do any research. They don't even pay attention to the argument being made. They just arrogantly think, oh, somehow you don't know anything about these patterns. No, I know plenty about them, asshole. I'm the one showing what the thing looks like. Okay, here it is. You know, much better image of it than your silly fucking drawing. Oops, wrong thing. Move. You know, so I mean, I've spent 10 years analyzing two slit and single slit experiments, and he sits there with some rudimentary garbage that he somehow I didn't account for it. It was stated in my video. It's just an amazing piece of shit to play this game, to advertise this as a debunking when he hasn't debunked a single fucking quote, not a single quote, not a single image, nothing debunked here at all. Just a fucking disgusting lie. Yeah. These are just, you know, you don't call this evil. I mean, how fucking evil can you be? You know, to just lie. Pretend you did something you didn't do. You didn't even come close to doing it. Didn't answer a single one of my questions. I have a video called Questions. Did you answer any of those questions? No. You didn't do anything. You got 3 comments that don't show up. Okay. But what a disgusting, despicable piece of shit. So, 11 views. Just not too many people care. But regardless. Alright, so we'll just call that a day. Say the hell with it. I mean, I guess we could go see what the other nutters are doing. The tinfoil hat room. Oh, they're not working today. That's strange. Yeah, that really should be there, right? The whatever it is, John Chappelle, blah blah blah. I guess it just didn't load the whatever, so it should be able to find it here somewhere. Science chat. You know, they send you the whatever, the reminder, you know, a week before they actually have the room. Live in 23 hours. Today is Saturday, isn't it? No, it's only Friday. Okay. So yeah, I'll have to wait till tomorrow. Alright. Not their fault this time. Okay, so I can't do that. Alright, so we'll call it a video. There's no point in dragging it out. I mean, I could play my own video again, but you know, I shouldn't have to do that. So I won't. I'll do the multi-slit next time, you know, explaining how they're all little sources and blah, 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 and the geometry and whatnot. But it explains it perfectly. So you can explain the whole thing by keeping photons as rays, recognizing that they have polarization and that they're just made out of little bits of quanta, and you can break the ray. You can take pieces out of the ray. You know, so this theory, yeah, it didn't debunk this theory at all. This is a photon. Photons have they're little clumps of quanta at specific distances, okay? And what happens when you put them through slits is you kill some of them and you deflect the little bits in different directions, and by doing so you have to reconstruct the phase by taking a bit of a photon that went over here. It's a photon going this way, this line. This photon, there's a whole bunch of photons running in parallel to each other, and all you're going to do is say, well, I'll take the first bit from this one, and I'll take the second bit from this one, and I'll take the third bit from this one, and the fourth bit from this one, and that will make a photon. So all you're doing is reconstructing the energy at a new location out of the broken bits of the photon. So he did nothing to debunk that theory. The end. Yeah. Pathetically pitiful video. Look, that's how they told it. It's just fake news, right? Fake news, fake science. He didn't do what his title claimed at all.